Hey guys, I just finished Act 1 of Baldur's Gate 3 with near 100% completion in terms of activities. I wanted to go through my party composition, like kind of where I would change stuff in the future, and then just some general tips. And I've been playing this for the Dark Urge on the hardest difficulty, which I believe is considered to be the hardest difficulty in this game. So this should apply pretty easily to like lesser difficulties, as well as if you're playing on Tactician. This is something that you can kind of mirror. Just hopping into it, right now I have four characters, three origins. Two of them are discovered later on. One of them that you get earlier. Right now I am running a rogue, a barbarian, a cleric, that's a damage-oriented cleric, and a warlock. I think of those classes, the rogue definitely feels the weakest. This is the beginning part of Act 2. I haven't started going into Act 2 fully yet, and I don't want to spoil the story at all here, but I wanted to go into some of the build decisions that I've made. So, the main character that I made was a Tempest domain cleric. I think this was definitely worth doing. My stat split I don't think was ideal. I don't like I originally had this thing where I was like, I'll go start with the Tempest cleric and then I'll go into sorcerer later on. I'm not sure if I want to do that anymore, to be honest. But the cleric Tempest cleric definitely feels strong later on. I'd say early on in the game, like probably up to level 5. It didn't feel as strong. But once you unlock Call Lightning, this build starts to really shine. The advantage that Call Lightning has is it's a 10-turn spell that does 3 to 30 damage that you can cast every single turn without using a spell slot. So basically it's just very consistent AoE damage that you can apply to a bunch of people, and because clerics are proficient in heavy armor, you can make this class super tanky. Of the original build I made, I modified it a bit. The feat I'm taking right now is Warcaster. This gives me advantage of concentration, which lets me cast that Call Lightning a little bit more. I don't have the most amount of con, have a decent amount of con. I had some stuff in Dex for just being able to start earlier in a fight. In hindsight, probably don't need that. Probably could have put that in a con or charisma and then kind of double down on one of those things. But this is the build overall. In terms of gear, I have gear that you get from the Forge, which I don't want to spoil yet, but there's a spot that you get into in the Deep Dark in Act 1 where you can craft some like very strong gear. This basically makes it so if someone hits me, they get debuffs. If they don't hit me, they also get debuffs. Puts my character at a 20 AC to start, which is about the highest that you can get that I'm aware of, minus like maybe finding like a ring of protection like later on and putting on some passive buffs. But very tanky class, very strong. Highly recommend it. I would not do the the actual race I picked was definitely not worth it. As cool as Dragonborns are, it's just like not very useful. The lightning resistance is like doesn't really help you that much, and that's like the main bonus it feels like this class has. The actual stuff that you get from it is just movement speed and this lightning breath, which lightning breath doesn't seem to scale super well. It just doesn't do good damage. At this point, like I'd rather use like a cantrip than lightning breath for the most part, and lightning breath it can only be used once per long rest, so it's like not super applicable, but overall very strong character. Would definitely recommend it. You can do a similar build to Shadowheart, you just have to change the domain. I don't think healing is like really necessary in most of these fights. It feels like you're able to just kind of outlast stuff overall, but I have like a relatively tanky party, which I'll get into later. In terms of my weakest character, I would argue it's probably my rogue right now. I'm still trying to work out how to make uh Astron like a little bit stronger. The gear set I have is like very solid. The base idea is every time he gets a kill, he goes invisible, and then from there you can go for another action. You get you're invisible, so you can do your sneak attacks and stuff. So that feels like pretty solid overall. But it's just the damage output isn't like quite there with just a pure rogue. Like I've been doing a thief rogue. I think I'm gonna try to do like some kind of like rogue slash barbarian or fighter multi-class, so I can get more attacks in, so I can cast the sneak attack more often, like get a kill, go invisible, go for another sneak attack kind of thing, or where you get your bonus actions. You have two of them for thief, so go invisible, sneak attack, go invisible, sneak attack kind of thing. But still, rogue very necessary. It feels like just to lockpick stuff. The AC is a little bit higher because I have defensive duelist on, so if I actually pull up my weapons, then I can add my my dex bonus to the AC, which is like where you see that +3 from, and why I'm able to get like relatively high AC with just light armor, which allows me to get advantage when moving around. So it makes this character like relatively tanky, doesn't take that much damage. The other thing I mostly do with the rogue is I try to get up on archers, put myself next to them so they get disadvantage on their attacks. I have a ring where I believe it's a ring. I have a no, it's these the gloves that basically every time someone hits me that's a range, I can use this as a reaction and I can reduce the damage that's coming into me, so that allows me to be even more tankier. So I don't have like a lot of healing with this party, but I have a lot of stuff that naturally mitigates damage, which allows me to live in like more difficult encounters without having to constantly spam like short and long rests. Like going through Act 1, I think I long rested 5 times, and it could have been 4, but I decided to finish out everything in Act 1, and that's it. It's just been mostly short rest. The other advantage of this kind of party is Warlocks, which I'll get into in a sec. They get their stuff from a short rest rather than a long rest. My Warlock gear is honestly like pretty bad, like compared to like the Rogue and the tank I have that I built. That's also a DPS because clerics are kind of stupid OP in 5e. But the Warlock does do a lot of damage. The advantage that Warlocks have is with the base Warlock that you have from the Fiend. Every time you get a kill, you gain like overhealth. So it's like effectively he effectively heals himself, even though he's not healing himself. The other thing I didn't realize is Eldritch Blast. When you take the extra damage and the knockback on it, it's actually like super strong in this game because there's so much elevation. There, like, I'd say every other fight, probably, I don't think it would be even lying to say like 75% of the fights, I'm able to kill like 1 to 2 people from Eldritch Blast, just knocking someone like off a cliff or into an environmental effect by positioning my Warlock right. The other thing too is you could do like Misty Step to get into position to cast that Eldritch Blast. The other thing with Warlocks is, besides getting these on a short rest, is you get access to like some pretty high level spells, but like upcasting isn't super beneficial. So like Hex is like nice for allowing my other people to do more damage. Like I can put the Hex on a Dex saving throw, and then from there I can cast like the Call Lightning on a target, which will make it more likely to do max damage. But it doesn't like seem to optimize the damage as much as just like kind of throwing fireballs around. So that's kind of interesting. It's not Fireball isn't as strong as this as like on an Evocation Wizard though, because like Evocation Wizards, if you throw a fireball and there's an ally there, the ally won't actually get hit by the fireball by like one of the passive effects that you have. So it's like it's good, but it's not like that good. I'd say the Warlock overall though, like most of the values from Eldritch Blast and knocking people off, definitely a character I would take again. Uh, and the last one I have was Barbarian. I had a fighter for a while. I feel like fighter doesn't do nearly as much damage as a barbarian does, and a barbarian also feels like tankier. My barbarian is like the character that kind of tends to die the most. ACs for barbarians just by their passives is relatively low. They just have access to a bunch of HP. So I kind of try to compensate that for going for an amulet that gives like resistances to stuff that like typically hits my barbarian, give them movement speed, or give her movement speed bonuses. And then I have this like temporary probably band where if I shove someone, then I get like a +1 to my AC, which is pretty easy to get because I have such a high strength. But Barbarian feels like pretty strong in terms of damage output. At this point, I have access to basically 3 attacks per turn, like I'm doing, and I have a Savage Attacker, so the higher attack roll that I roll 2 die every time I do an attack, the higher roll I take as my actual damage. So, but the Barbarian I have is able to put out like pretty consistently like 40 to 50 damage per turn, which is just like way above what the other characters are able to do at this level. So Barbarian's like definitely like it's like a tank, but it's also like an insane DPS and definitely worth doing. There is like some interesting dialogue when you get Karlach and Will, because Will doesn't like Karlach at first, and it won't spoil that whole conversation, but like that's something you kind of have to manage, and there's some consequences for going for a party like this, but it feels pretty strong overall for sticking to the actual origins of the characters themselves, and definitely would recommend it. Uh, but yeah, just like overall, like this party is built for self-survivability, not for healing. So Karlach has a bunch of HP. Like Karlach just naturally does kind of die in a fight. But because there's 59 health points to get through, that's like relatively high for this level. I'm able to live like pretty consistently, and because of all the movement speed that Karlach has, like at a certain point I could take Karlach out of the fight and just kind of go for ranged effects, which aren't nearly as strong because Dex is like relatively low. But it's something that you can kind of get away with. Uh, Warlocks, like you're just kind of spamming Eldritch Blast from a distance, you're getting your passive health. Sometimes that you go in for a fight, and you'll get value there. But overall, it's just like a lot of like finding tricky ways to live and not necessarily spamming spells, I think is the main thing for this. I think you can get away with spamming spells, but from the early on, it seems like you're on a timer, so I went for a party that did not have to spam spells. Still don't really know at this point, because I haven't looked up a ton of spoilers, if there is like a timer-based mechanic with the Mind Flayers, but it definitely seems that way, getting from Act 1 to Act 2. So this party feels pretty good overall. Tanks just feel like pretty solid in terms of clerics. Rogues feel weaker to me, but necessary because you have to lockpick so many things, so that's why I went for that. The other thing I've debated going is like the knight class, or sorry, the ranger class that has stealth-based mechanics. I think that one could be pretty interesting as well. A lot of the time I find myself having to use ranged damage, so that's something that I might try in the future. Warlocks feel solid, and Barbarians just have access to really good damage. So that's what I've been using overall to get from Act 1 to Act 2. Let me know what you guys have done in terms of your optimization. I didn't really touch like the stats of characters a ton besides my main character, if at all. And even then, in the main character, I'd probably like change the stats if I could, but I'm not aware of a way to do that right now. So that's what I've been doing overall for this run, guys, and I will see you later.